from dungeons to starships, and our ongoing series of videos where we're looking at the greatness of some true old hammer miniatures. With this episode, I can honestly say that we've reached the pinnacle in our countdown of our top 5 favourite old hammer miniatures. And as I said in the last episode, it's going to be something very special that was going to appear in our top 2 places. So let's see again if you agree or disagree with our selections. Now, I also know that guys who have been here from the start will be bored with me introducing the task at choice of which we put down and the reasons behind the choices that we'll be making. But there are others that are just joining us for the first time with this video, so it's always good to set our stall out. So this has been a series of 5 videos, and we've been looking at older miniatures that we're wanting to champion and how they can be considered to add a level of maybe character to the rank and flank units that you may now be creating for your games of Warhammer the Old World. Many people have been vocal about the ranges of models being offered as the older plastics. But we are here to offer a counter to that and have a look back even further to the metal sculpted miniatures of the late 80s and early 90s. The miniatures themselves must be able to hit 4 criteria. First, they must be available to be fielded on the table in either one of the armies from the Forces of Fantasy or the Ravening Horde sourcebooks, as well as being able to be fielded through one of the legacy PDFs that have been produced by Games Workshop. Second, must be costed not to break the bank. And for this, we have been using our benchmark figure of the Questing Knight Paladin that's available to us from Forge World. Thirdly, it must stand up in scale to the newer availability of models that we have. Because we all know with some ranges from Games Workshop, as the models have become newer, they've suffered from a bit of scale creep. So what we want to make sure is that the models physically are not going to look out of place next to other figures within these rank and flank style armies. And finally, paint. Now, a lot of people bemoan older models about the paint that they were shown with. So what we want to do is try and find examples of these old hammer monsters painted up and make sure that when they're painted to the same standards and the same level of technology of paint that's available to us today, again, they don't look out of place with their more modern counterparts. So we've reached number 2 in our all-time list of 5. And during this series, we've looked at some seriously awesomely sculpted models. And while most of them have been cited to be from the desk of Jez Goodwin, it will be remiss of us not to mention other noticeable artists in that sculpting studio. And today we're going to be talking about one gentleman in particular, one member of that artistic community, Mr. Kevin Adams. Now in 1983, Kevin Adams entered a Citadel painting competition where his work was spotted by Brian Ansell, who immediately put him to work as a freelance painter. But in 1985, Brian would make a gift to Kevin that would probably change his direction within the GW community. And Brian gifted him his first roll of green stuff. And then Kevin found his true love was in creating and sculpting the miniatures. whether it was for the alternative heads or the conversions to existing models he was making in the outset, or in 1986 when he finally moved to Nottingham and was working with other sculptors such as the Perry twins, Ali Morrison, Tris Carden, Mark Copplestone, to name but a few. And with that, mixing directly with such fellows as John Blanche. Now, whilst Kevin is noted for a number of miniature sculpts, the awesomely gory zombies inspired by the cult classic movie Zombie being one of my favourites, he's more directly identified with his work with orcs and goblins, and has in fact been given the informal title of the Goblin Master. Now, if you'd like to know a bit more about the life and work of Kevin, you've got some options rather than listening to me. Wombat Wargames recently put out the John Blanche autobiography, and this has been a great read. But luckily enough, Wombat Wargames have also produced one on Kevin Adams himself. So we've got a lot of availability for you to go and have a look at some of the history of these two guys. And it'd be nice to know that if Wombat Wargames was actually going to do more of a series on the other alumni from GW of this period. It can't be overlooked that the aesthetic that Kevin used for his orcs, goblins, has been the DNA behind every other orc and goblin model that has been produced afterwards. Whether from the German uniform-inspired original Space Orcs, which was taken because of his love of Airfix kits that he used to play with in his younger days, to the modern more boys and with all their glory for Warhammer 40k, and that from his extensive range of Warhammer fantasy models. It only takes a little bit for you to work through the older catalogues from Games Workshop, especially those orcs and goblin sections, because at the bottom of the page each one has the cited sculptor's name at the bottom, the extensive range, and the fact that pretty much Kevin seems to be responsible for 90% of the orc and goblin figures that were around during that period between the 80s and 90s. So for that then, we really must bow to his official title of the Goblin Master. Although we are citing that Kevin is responsible for 90% of all orcs and goblin miniatures, it's not the orcs that we're going to include on our list. It's not their even more characterful cousins, the snotlings that come in later years, even though these are bursting with character. But we're going to move towards the goblins. Now, to me, with these goblins, these are pretty much the pinnacle of character that has been produced by GW. And I don't think I can go too far to say that these are amongst the best sculpted miniatures that GW have ever produced. So again, just like with last video when we were talking about the war dancers, there has been discussion and some disagreement about what the best model from this series is. And unfortunately, I had to put my foot down and I had to choose my favourite. Now, this miniature, along with our good friend Rafe Wisp's awesome paint, you can just imagine the wicked thoughts going on in his head. His little goblin mind contemplating what he's going to do with that blade once he's drawn it, and maybe you have your back turned. So as Rafe Wisp's paint shows, this model more than will stand up against a more modern sculpt done in the same style. Again, we have more modern versions of orcs and goblins for which to compare our scale against. So here is our choice next to one of the more modern light goblin models. And you can again see with this that the actual older models are slightly larger than their modern counterparts. So therefore, we believe are going to stand up to a bit more of the robust bashing that we're going to be getting as you move them from game to game and push them about on the table. The cost itself is again well within the figure that's set by our questing knight paladin. So again, more than acceptable in terms of costs. So therefore, we feel that this miniature hits all 4 of our criteria. But there are so many good orcs and goblin models out there for you to choose from this range. So again, do we assign number 2 to a soul model? I don't think we can. What I believe is that what we must put in at number 2 is the complete range of the sculpts created by Kevin Adams, because whichever one you choose, I don't think you can go wrong. So what do you reckon? Right or wrong again? Do you have something else in your top 2? And you never know, maybe will your choice agree with our number 1 choice and the finale in this series that will be coming up on the next episode. I'll hope you'll tune in to find out, but I'll also hope that you'll leave your comments about your choices and your favourites down in the comments section of this video. And please drop us a like and subscribe so you can be fully aware of when that next video lands.